F1 tried to fix the Monaco Grand Prix with a mandatory 2 pit stop race, and you can see from our post-race video on this subject, it didn't really work. We had rolling roadblocks, we had what some drivers called a contrived and manipulated race. We had Max Verstappen basically saying, doesn't matter how many pit stops you do in Monaco, it doesn't change anything. And so there are calls again for the track to change. Basically, you'll always have these kind of games and boring races at Monaco while there's no realistic chance of the cars actually overtaking each other on track. And Alex Wurz thinks he has the answer. He's, for those of you who don't know, chairman of the GPDA, the Grand Prix Drivers Association. He also runs a circuit design company that's doing work currently on the new Qiddiya circuit in Saudi Arabia and also in Rwanda. He posted some proposals on Instagram, and basically, Ed, we're going to go through those Wurz proposals and cast our critical eye over them. So, are you ready?
Absolutely. Always ready.
Okay, excellent. Let's go. So, proposal number 1, moving the Nouvelle chicane. So that's the chicane, for those who don't know, immediately after the tunnel, where Pierre Gasly rear-ended Yuki Tsunoda and they had a bit of a disagreement about it. Wurz's proposal, which has been discussed, he says, with fellow F1 drivers, is to extend the tunnel exit and move the chicane further down, presumably down the escape road, towards Tabak. And Wurz says, I'm very convinced from my own experience watching the races and talking to my fellow drivers that moving the chicane later, which physically, with the constraints any city has, should be possible. It means defending for this corner, which is quite easy to do, with the kink and the bumps, will become more difficult. What do you reckon, Ed? Move the chicane further down? Will that work?
Yeah, well, obviously it will extend that run out of the tunnel 80-odd metres. That's a positive thing, a little bit more time to make an overtake happen. I don't think that 80 metres will be transformative and turn it into a super easy opportunity, but every little helps. What I like about Wurz's proposals across the board is they're all quite light touch, although this is the least light touch of all of them, given if you look at the shape of the track, there would need to be some work done to reshape it kind of into the harbour, if you like. So I like this idea. It seems the most logical place to try and extend the track effectively. You're extending the track without extending it, if you like. There's a certain amount of space there with the road to work into. So I'm sure that aspect of it would be fairly easy. And look at all the reclamation projects they've done in Monaco. It wouldn't be hard to cut into the harbour a little bit. Whether they want to cut into their harbour real estate, if you can call the harbour real estate, is another question. But it looks practical, and yeah, it's a way that will make overtaking go from almost impossible, although Lance Stroll did make a move there on Nico Hülkenberg on the last lap, to very slightly less almost impossible, but still very difficult. So yeah, a sensible idea, even though I don't think it'll be completely transformative.
What do you think about the knock-on effect for the next corner to back? Because Wurz is quite conscious of the need to not completely wreck that challenge. You know, he says in the proposals, not flat out, you don't want it to become basically an acceleration zone for the swimming pool. But whatever you do in terms of pushing that chicane back, you're inevitably going to make to back slower. So presumably, even if you preserve it as a driving challenge, it's not flat out. There was a lot of talk at the weekend about, could the McLaren drivers match Leclerc? Could they do it in 5th gear rather than 4th? If it becomes a 3rd gear corner, maybe a 4th, then it potentially becomes easy and you neutralise one of the big driving challenges.
Yeah, I think it would be a shame to neutralise Tabak a little bit, because I've had the privilege of standing there and watching, and it's
great.
A phenomenal manifestation of what drivers do. It's a quite quick corner. They're threading the needle, absolutely remarkable. But it comes down to what's your priority. If it's considered that it's absolutely mission critical to try and up the overtaking opportunities, then that's a legitimate sacrifice to make. So you don't get something for nothing, do you? And this change is, as I say, extending the track without extending the track, if you like. So nothing is completely 100% beneficial. So if that's what it takes to secure Monaco's future, if you like, as a viable race, and you consider that's the most important priority, then fine. I think it would be a shame, but yeah, you don't get something for nothing.
Yeah, that's one of the other elements actually sort of underpinning all of this. Monaco isn't kind of the sort of golden child race of Formula One that it used to be. It feels like its whole place on the calendar, even though stakeholders, team bosses are still talking it up as mega and really important. It's not Liberty's showpiece race, is it anymore? So it feels like it's got to kind of try to move at the times where it can, and maybe changing the track is inevitable some way down the road. Let's move on to number 2 of the Wurz changes, a little bit further round the lap, reprofiling Rascasse. So Wurz proposes changing the profile of the Rascasse corner so the apex is moved 2 or 3 metres further out, but within the constraints of, the existing limitations physically. He reckons when this apex comes further out, the entry line will definitely change. I think he's proposing it's a bit straighter rather than this kind of continuous radius from the swimming pool round to the tight bit. You will open the corner much more for a dive bomb, and that means any driver ahead will either have to defend or accept he leaves the door open. If you're defending, you will come out much slower, so you're creating a train behind you, and the pressure on all of the drivers will simply increase. I think this is a small trick, quite easy to realise, but should at least engage in more fighting, more intense pressure, and perhaps overtaking. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it seems like quite a sensible thing to do. It's the lightest touch of all of them. It would be pretty easy to do. There's the space there. So what Wurz says makes sense. I don't think it's going to, again, lead to attacks every single lap, but you're just trying to give a hint of an opportunity, aren't you? And we have seen in that corner occasionally passes. I remember Gil Bianchi passing Kamui Kobayashi there in the 2014 race on his way to points, for example. And there have been a few other examples. It's tight, but possible. So, yeah, this seems to me to be a way to just slightly up the percentage chance without really changing the track in a particularly significant way. So this one seems to me to be a bit of a no-brainer, actually, unless there's some unseen infrastructure issue. But thinking about that area, there is space there to do what Alex Wurz suggests. So I'd say this one seems like a very viable idea.
Yeah, I'd like the idea of, even if you're not creating a nailed-on overtaking opportunity, just the chance of one where you can kind of play the percentages badly and take a risk. I remember, pre these massive steroidal huge F1 cars still in the hybrid era sort of 10 years ago, there was enough of a chance that people would take a plunge and then you might get a collision, and that changes the race because it's a safety car or some kind of rolling of the dice moment. And I feel like we've lost that with this generation of cars so big. Nobody even thinks about passing at Rascasse really unless they're being let through. So I think just even if it's not nailed on, just creating that opportunity, even if it's slim, has the potential for knock-on chaos, which I think is what kind of Wurz is getting at. How would you like to win a Ferrari cap signed by either Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton? We've got these incredible prizes to offer 2 lucky winners, courtesy of our friends at Monaco Inside Track, who offer walking tours of the roads that form that iconic F1 circuit, full of detailed insight about the history of that incredible race. To enter, all you have to do is be a member with us on Patreon. Then head to our competition post and comment with the name of the Ferrari driver whose signed cap you'd like to win. You can only enter once, but you are allowed to say both drivers. And as an added bonus for anyone in our Champions tier, you'll be granted a double entry if you take part. This competition is open to anyone with an active membership in either our Racers tier or the Champions tier. So head to the link in the description of this episode to enter before the competition closes on May 31st. And you can currently get 75% off your first month with us as we celebrate F1's 75th birthday. So hurry and sign up. Don't miss out. Third and final one. We're going round past the start finish straight onto our next lap now. The Fairmont hairpin, which I don't know as the Fairmont hairpin. For me, it's the Lowe's hairpin, but it's called Fairmont now apparently, so we'll go with it. Wurz believes there's an opportunity to expand the track by just more than 2 metres here at both the entry and the exit. So he's talking about widening it, basically. He says it means drivers coming down have an easier opportunity to do a dive bomb, so that word again. It means the lead driver will have to defend more, so he'll be slower. But the hairpin is very tight, so we need to also enlarge the track on the exit, lose the curb, and have asphalt all the way to this physical wall. So we have the turning radius. At the moment, obviously, F1 teams, they employ special steering systems just for Monaco because that's the tightest corner on the track. So he's talking about kind of bringing it back more into the mainstream. The real ideal racing line will not change from what it is. It will just lead into a little bit more defending, and therefore this corner will actually initiate the overtaking into the new chicane, which obviously he's planning to do further round after the tunnel. And all that together should be an improvement for the overtaking and raceability in the streets of Monaco.
Yeah, again, a logical enough suggestion. It depends on how keen they are to remove pavements in there, because that's basically what the curves are. There, pavements. You've got like pavement on the inside and the outside. I mean,
Screw the pedestrians.
Exactly. But there's ways and means you can do that. You can probably take it out and have some kind of temporary thing, or that's there all the year round, if you like. I say temporary, so effectively taking them out is temporary. So slightly harder to do than the Rascas one, certainly, but it would open it up a bit more. It's still a very, very tight hairpin. That's not going to change. It'll be just fractionally less tight because they have to fit basically bespoke steering to be able to actually get round it. But if it gives you the opportunity for a car maybe just to ambush someone, absolutely chuck it up the inside, worth a go. Again, I don't think you're going to see millions of overtakes there or anything, but we used to see, again, if we're going back 10, 12 years ago, you'd see the odd pass there. Someone would mug someone really early in the race. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So again, it's upping the very low percentage chance to a still very low percentage chance, but just a little bit higher. So these are all sensible moves, and I think this one probably should be looked at. Again, road furniture, that kind of thing needs to be understood, and you probably need to convince Monaco to do that, but I don't see any reason why this one can't be viable. It's kind of the middle one in terms of the difficulty. I'd say the Rascas one, very easy to do. The Lowe's one, probably pretty straightforward as long as there's a will. The chicane one, a little bit more complicated. But then it comes down to the question of, if you do all three, you're just upping the chances, the opportunities a little bit everywhere. And that's not going to turn Monaco into an overtaking fest. But does that get it over the line? Does that create just that possibility that you can do it? Does that mean that if you're Daniel Ricciardo and you're down on your air's power, you can't just park in front of everyone? Does that mean if you're Liam Lawson, you can't back everyone up, or Carlos Sainz? And that's the question. I think all credit to Wurz for actually tabling some really sensible, credible possibilities using his expertise that I think absolutely warrant being looked at. And then whether there's something bigger you can do somewhere along the line, that's another question, should be looked at. But I like the fact these are real world solutions that Wurz has proposed that might just take Monaco from below the line to above the line of the percentage chance of overtaking needed.
Well, two questions there. Firstly, does it need to be taken over that line at all? We can get to that maybe later. But underpinning all of this, it seems to be the cars themselves, because all of those areas that he's identified are places where, as you mentioned, there has been overtaking in the past, or at least attempts at overtaking, whereas now we don't get them. You know, you used to be able to pass into the chicane out of the tunnel. People used to have a go at Rascas, even if they mostly got it wrong. We have seen, I watched it recently, Gerhard Berger dive bomb Jean Alesi at the station hairpin in the Ferrari and make it work in 1993 before ramming Damon Hill. So now there's just no chance at all. The cars have got too big. There's even suggestions they've outgrown tracks like Imola, never mind Monaco. So what about the cars? Next year, they change completely. They're meant to be smaller. They're meant to be lighter. The engine profile is different, particularly with the ERS. Can you see that kind of naturally solving the Monaco problem so they don't need to go into the harbour and do even these changes that Wurz has suggested?
I don't think the size of the cars will make a huge difference. Yeah, it's all in the right direction, but again, it's fiddling around the edges. And you've also got to remember that Formula 1 cars are really quick as well. And that's significant because the quicker the car, the shorter the straights, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
The less time there is to kind of close on somebody. So
and brake and whatnot.
Exactly, that plays a part. Now, the interesting question is if there's the possibility of using the power units as they are. You've got this overtake mode as well. You could play tunes with that. You could reduce the amount of power you get as normal there, for example, to make it possible to overtake. You could make that the car behind's always got that chance, or in certain circumstances, creating kind of a power-based DRS, but making it more extreme. So there's things that they could look at with that. But I don't think it's going to fundamentally change things unless you do something more extreme like that. And some would say artificial. But again, if the absolute priority is to make overtaking a little bit more possible at Monaco, then you do it, don't you? And you look at ways to do it. So I would say do a bit of that, look at the track, all those little bits together, you can make gains here and there. But I would also say, I think the fact the cars are so big also in some ways does increase the spectacle, because we should never lose sight of the fact that while the race day at Monaco is, if you look at it as a race, arguably the worst race of the year, although there were certainly talking points in this year's race. I didn't really like it, but people were certainly talking about it and there was stuff going on. But Saturday is the best qualifying day. It's basically the best qualifying day of the year. It's arguably the best day of the year. It
Best
is
practices as well, because it all builds to the crescendo, doesn't it?
I think people must not underestimate how astonishing it is what Grand Prix drivers do around there in those cars. It's mind-blowing. It is ridiculous to be able to go that quick in that big a car in that confined a space. It defies logic. There is no other track that gets close to that. And I think it would be a real shame to, in the desperation to make the show on Sunday better, throw everything out and lose that. Because what we get, okay, let's have another Vegas or another Miami. Oh, great. What's F1 gaining there? Because for me, the value of the Monaco Grand Prix is that driving challenge on a qualifying lap is absolutely sensational. Forget all the off-track stuff and the commercial stuff and the glamour and the glitz, don't care. The driving, the absolute spectacle is incredible. And I think it would be misguided to lose that. And that's also why I'm open to seeing what can be done just to create these better opportunities on Sunday, because you only need to move the dial up, a few clicks here and there, and then suddenly things become possible.